Well, good morning, everyone. Well, at least good morning in Brisbane. And welcome to this Qualitative event. I wanted to talk a little bit today about theory and its importance and how it actually drives much of the way that we study tourism and, in fact, any scientific area. Just a warning, I have a particular paradigm, a way of thinking about the world that I use. It's called realism. And so in the realist paradigm, you can approach an understanding of the world around you, although that you never may think that it's complete or correct. So this is the idea that we can actually develop theories which have some relevance in many different places rather than just in the area. And this realism paradigm, or the paradigms that each one of us adopts when we're doing our research, really influences how we think about theory and method and our results. So the first thing I wanted you to do is to understand I'm approaching this topic from a particular point of view, which may be different from the one that you have, and that's okay. I think the first and one of my main points is you just need to understand how you think about theory, paradigms, and so on. My topic, hopefully it's a little bit controversial. It's theory in the study of tourism: origin, adaptation, impact, and retirement. Now, and retirement means stopping using some theory, which I don't find we're particularly good at in tourism as an area of study. Anyway, let's see how we go. So the first, so my outline is, I want to talk a little bit about the nature of theory. What is theory? So approaches to tourism theory, what that means for academic research in applied areas like tourism. I want to try and answer the question, well, what do we do then? If given what you've said, Noel, what do we do? And give you some practical examples of how I think things should be developing in tourism theory, and then two possible conclusions that you could draw from this study. So we'll see how we go. Of course, I'm not the first person to think about tourism theory, and I wanted to acknowledge that there's been, in fact, a significant amount of recent thinking about tourism theories, concepts, and models. There was a great book by Bob McKercher, who I think was talking today, Guy Lohmann, for example, and Professor Netto. Then there's guys doing work on the theory of dining, and John Tribe is a person who's done a lot of this work in the past, creating and curating tourism knowledge. Chris Cooper is also is one of the leading people in looking at tourism knowledge. John Tribe again, David Airy and others. So there's been a bit of thinking about what do we mean by tourism theory, which is pretty central to what people need to think about if they're doing a PhD to start with, for example. So there's lots of different things. Question, can you have a theory of dining? Can you have a theory of events? Now, Professor Roberts has been writing papers about this quite recently, very interesting. And there have been other people who've talked about theory of hospitality, for example. Or Don Getz and Professor Zikas has talked about event portfolio management, and how it's a transdisciplinary field of theory. So there's lots of interesting ideas going on when we're discussing theory, but it's a bit unclear, perhaps sometimes, what we mean, or if we're all talking about the same thing. Clearly we're not. And again, so my point is, I think you need to think about your ideas to compare those to some of the ways that other authors are thinking about them. And don't just accept that if Mr. Roberts is talking about a theory of dining, that you necessarily agree with that. So when we're discussing the concept of theory, we're talking about, I mean, tourism, again, talk about theory, it's a little bit old, a little bit new. You know, people have been talking about philosophy and ontology, epistemology, methodology, logic for what, 4,000 years. And so the idea that tourism theory is new is incorrect. In fact, I think that's one of the issues. People in tourism may not be aware of the depth of knowledge and thinking that has already been in place in many areas. And one thing I'd suggest, although it would be interesting to hear questions, is when you're doing your PhD, are you getting any lectures, any information or study about the philosophy of knowledge and what other people have talked about theory? So, and that'd be an interesting thing to see if anyone is actually receiving training in their doctoral studies on the philosophy of knowledge and theory and things. Anyway, so let's get down to it. What's theory? Well, you know, like anything in tourism or anything in academic life, there are a range of opinions and a range of definitions. And so don't expect that any definition is without discussion, without debate. And of course, in tourism, that's the same. So many people, for example, might quote a guy called Babby, who wrote a book on this called The Practice of Social Research, 2013. And he talks about theory as a systematic sets of interrelated statements intended to explain some aspect of social life. Interesting. Now, I've highlighted social life because this theory, this definition, seems to indicate that there's something about social life that is different from theory in other areas. And the question is, do you believe that? I don't myself, but many people do. Perhaps a more less social and more general theory, a definition of theory, is a set of interrelated concepts, definitions, and propositions that present a systematic view of phenomena by specifying relationships among variables with the purpose of explaining and predicting the phenomena. And so that's a much more general definition. It's not saying there's theory about social life. It's saying there is theory, and this is what it is. And the other interesting thing I would draw attention to in that second definition, it talks about predicting. And so one of the questions is because Babby only says explaining some aspect, whereas other people say, no, theory should predict what's going to happen in future. Oh, well, can you predict social life? Maybe not, but you may be able to predict some phenomena. So what are we, maybe these theories these definitions are actually pointing to some very interesting things about tourism and how people are thinking about it. Another one, so McKirch and Prudhoe quote a guy from organizational behavior, I think, in 1998, said explaining any existing phenomena and also how to predict new phenomena. All right. Well, to me, that's a little bit, it has the words prediction in it, but it's about prediction of new phenomena, not predicting how existing phenomena will behave in future. So I think that, like anything, theories help to, are based on particular academics' views of tourism or what they're studying and their own way of thinking. And I'm much more interested in theory definition number 2. I want to predict phenomena. I don't just want to explain them or, in fact, describe them. I want to I want to do prediction, because I think that that's what the industry wants. That's what most people working in tourism want. They don't want to know about what's happened in the past. They want to know what the future is going to be like. And unless, therefore, you can predict, your research isn't particularly as useful as it could be. So again, think about that. So, so here's some other ideas about theory. It's verifiable. You can test it using empirical research. It's coherent. So parts of a theory fit together. Or a better theory is more economical.
No.
No, I can't hear you. I've lost you. You there?
Yes, I think we lost him.
Well,
It's
just
already-
maybe looks like he's frozen a bit.
Yep.
I'll just send him a message. Great participation, though.
Or maybe I will email him just in case.
Yep. That sounds good. There, he's trying to connect now. I can see. Hey, no, we just lost you there for a bit. Oh, you're on mute.
Mute. Oh.
Look, yes, I'm sorry. This is a Telstra problem.
Yeah, that's all right.
Is everyone listening? I'm back. Everything's okay?
Yep, all good.
All
You
right.
can share screen.
And I'll share my screen again. Apologize for that. Share screen.
It's the future of events.
Yes. Okay. So sorry. Am I back?
Yep, you're back.
Okay. Sorry about that. So predict future observations, be generative of new ideas and new discoveries. Okay. So some people will think that theory does some of these things. And I want you to, the key message I want you to think about is, what do you think? What's your idea of what theory is? Okay, so now so one of the key, another key message I want you to think about is there good theory and better theory. Just because someone uses a particular theory doesn't necessarily mean it's the best one. One of the ideas that I'm very keen on is that theory changes, and we need to therefore use the best theory that we can in our research. And unless we're doing that, then we're not good researchers. And if we just go back to a particular type of theory because it's well used, it doesn't mean that it's the best theory. And in fact, one of the purposes of being an academic is to continually try to improve theory. That's why that's our job. And so that's my opinion, but again, it might be a bit controversial. So better theory might be where you can judge it by its accuracy within a domain, how you need to compare theories to see if one is superior or not, how generalizable it is, how level of abstraction. So there's very different ways that you can judge or examine theory. And of course, theory can be at different levels. Sometimes people talk, well, meta theory level, I think that is what people might talk about as a paradigm. So the meta theory level that I ascribe to is about paradigms, is the paradigm of realism. There's grand theory levels, theories which seek to explain all phenomena within their scope. Then there's what they call middle range theories, theories which might apply in a particular area. And tourism has a lot of that. And then there's practical level theories, things which are arguably not necessarily theoretical in the hard sense. They just are a bit of a description about some aspect. And you can also think about, I won't go to that. So think about the scope of your theory. So different approaches to tourism theory. You might think about tourism having its own theoretical basis. I think that's rubbish myself, but many people think tourism has a theory. Most people, I know I was speaking to Professor McKercher about this the other day. He said, no, tourism doesn't have any theory. But many people try and create concepts which are specific to tourism. We'll talk about that in a minute. Tourism, a second approach is tourism is an application area for theory from other disciplines. That's what I believe. Then people might say, oh, no, tourism is an interdisciplinary area. Well, to me, that's describing tourism, and it's pretty much the same as two. Application area for theory from disciplinary areas. Interdisciplinary then means, well, I work on studying this application area with people from another discipline at the same time. Grounded theory, well, grounded theory is perhaps a way of talking about theory of the middle range. It's, or another way of saying it's about just developing a particular theory for this part of
I think we've lost Noel again.
Yeah.
Noel, are you there?
Yeah, I think just wait.
Yeah, we'll wait.
Yeah. All good.
Oh, no, is he there?
No. The
We've got
picture is
plenty of
breaking
time. We've
down.
got plenty of time, so that's not the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, no problem. Hopefully. Alfie, could you please add him in again, or
Yep.
he will? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, there is.
Back again, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. I don't know what's happening, but I'm getting quite annoyed about it. And so I'll probably try and talk to Telstra after this. Okay, so share screen again. Here we are. Hopefully that's the second time and that won't happen again. Can you see my screen, Gia?
Yeah. And we've got plenty of time. It's only 11:37. So.
Okay, so I just want you to. So I was talking about, for those people who think that tourism has its own area of thinking, own area of theory. Tourism theory and its concepts differ from those in other disciplines. People who think that might come up with ideas like the tourist gaze. Okay. Now, the tourist gaze, for example, suggests that tourists look at things in a different way from everyone else. Do you think that's true, Gia?
Sorry, yes.
Ah, rubbish. Well, how, you think about the way our brain works.
Yeah.
How can our brain work differently?
I mean, from maybe motivation things, definitely why I gonna go outside for traveling is different from the people who sit in a house just in front of the computer.
Oh, good. So you believe that we should have a theory for going to the shops and for relaxing on Sundays, and
Maybe.
and what about a theory for going to the top of mountains, right? I know, we'll have a theory about wearing hats. Okay. So you're saying that just because people think differently in a situation, we should have a theory about that. Okay, think. What about sorry, Gia.
Yeah, that's okay. It's quite impressive. Yeah.
Or there's people might think about tourism lifestyle as being as having theory which is different from normal lifestyle theory. Not the phenomena itself is different, but the actual theory is different. You see? So I don't believe that. I believe that there is this thing called lifestyle, and when people are, and there's a theory about lifestyle, and then when people are tourists, they do it one way.
Oh no, again. Sorry, Alfie, you mute yourself. I can't hear you.
There is also a question in the chat. When maybe Noel comes back, we could just ask that question.
Okay.
So will you manage those?
When they're non-tourists, they do it.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah. No. No.
Noel, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Oh, again.
So is Firoze in the room? Yep, there you are. It's just, I think Noel does not keep an eye on the chat for questions, so maybe Gia keep an eye on the chat for the questions.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Sorry.
Back again. Sorry, guys. I don't know what's happening. Share screen. But
That's okay.
I like to think that this is sort of developing a sense of excitement in the group, because you never know what I'm going to say next. All right. So so basically the idea that tourism has a distinct theory, I think, is provably incorrect. And this is what's behind. And that's why when people talk about the theory of dining, I don't agree with them. But what that means is that they have a different way of thinking about theory than I do. It doesn't say they're wrong, because it's hard to know if you can compare my paradigm with their paradigm. Although, because I'm a person who believes in incrementally developing better theory, I actually think mine is better, but that's just my paradigm. Okay, so the alternative is that tourism is an application area and that many different theories are used to study it. And this is sort of like the idea of the 7 blind men. I don't know if you've heard of that one, where everyone is trying to study some phenomena, the elephant, and they use their own perceptions or ideas to do it. And everyone gets a different picture, but together they are sort of helping to understand what this phenomena is. And in this particular case, the blind men or blind women are people from particular disciplines. So the people from economics will be studying one part of the elephant. People from sociology will be studying another part of the elephant, and so on. Doesn't mean, and so the question is, can all these things be independent? Or how much are different disciplines studying the same thing? Interesting question. There's another interesting thing about the application of knowledge. This comes from John Tribe's paper, The Truth About Tourism, where he says tourism as a phenomena, the circle on the left-hand side, and is studied by people with particular positions or ideology or rules or aims, and that determines what knowledge is produced. So this is clearly the point that, as I'm saying, there are different disciplines or different groups of people who are studying tourism, producing the knowledge, and therefore, if you want to understand the knowledge and how it relates to tourism, you have to understand the positions and ideology and rules of the people who are producing the knowledge. Okay, very important. And you now, as PhD students or researchers, are some of these people. So you need to understand your position, your ideology, your paradigm. What I think is that tourism imports theory from other areas and that it's particularly inefficient at doing this, like most applied areas. So here's an example of how psychological theory has been applied in tourism. So if we think about the various, so I consider psychology, the people in psychology as the experts. They're the people who are developing the theories, And those ideas are then transferred to business, consumer behavior, tourism. And so in the red box, the dotted box, you'll see 3 different particular theories or grand theories of how psychology and our brain works. The first one was from the 1930s. That was Freud, psychodynamics, and psychoanalytics. Then the psychologists moved on to behavioral psychology. And then most recently, from about the 1980s, there's been this cognitive revolution about how our brain works. Now, the point is that when consumer behavior was starting in business schools, they imported the dominant theories from behavioral psychology, which is why we have we study an area called consumer behavior, and why we don't study cognitive psychology, because the business schools got these theories and then they said, well, now we have our own theory. We don't need to look back in the original discipline to find out what the new ideas are. And of course, when tourism study started, they took their ideas from consumer behavior. So we are using ideas in most of our thinking from behavioral psychology, which is why we study tourism behavior, and we're not thinking about new ideas. So we have become, because often people are trying to create their own tourism theories, we have lost sight of changes in the original disciplines, and why I place so much emphasis, and some others do, on understanding cognitive psychology, because it explains a lot more, because it's better theory. So, example, destination image. Where did destination image come from? Came from psychology in the 1940s and 30s often. Then it was imported into geography by Boulding, who came up with the destination or image, geographical image, which then moved over into tourism by the work of Gunn and Hunt and so on. And they created this term called destination image, which was developed in tourism. But the bottom line is, these ideas are old ideas, and they're confused because people think that what's written in tourism is the best knowledge. It's not. What is written in tourism is adaptations of ideas from psychology, which are often old and arguably not best theory today. And certainly there are theories from cognitive psychology which are more better theories in terms of improving theory. Interdisciplinarity, I think this is a bit of a interdisciplinarity is the idea that we can develop our own theory based on 2 or 3 different disciplines coming together. And I don't think that the idea of developing tourism theory is correct. It's not the best way of going. Grounded theory. So this is sort of like, I think Bob McKercher might call it a methodology. So it's about developing from the ground up, from observing and then trying to explain that in terms of theories. Well, again, to me, it's a sort of let's develop our own theory type of idea. Socially critical agenda. So this is something that's come into tourism in, maybe the 2000s. And there's a lot of work done in this area. Here's a paper, here's a book on it. I don't think myself that socially critical studies are theoretical in the good sense. They are because they're based on a ideological assumption. Now, some people would say, no, well, science is based on some ideological assumptions and our ideological assumptions are as good as theirs. Don't believe so. Now, if we think about how most theory works, we can think about three problems. Firstly, many studies are empirically driven and not based on prior theory. Still, most of our theories like that. So it's about correlation and not explanation. Sometimes people try and say that they have an explanation based on correlation, which is wrong. But so if you're driving things based on just the study of something, you're always liable to the problems of the problems of your data's incorrect. So to me, without a theory, you're like a witch doctor. You say, oh, I have got some findings, believe me, because it's true. Right? Example, I went to Indonesia and I climbed a ladder with rungs made from knives. So therefore, I walked in this in bare feet and I was not harmed. Therefore, God protected me. That's an explanation based on observation. But of course, if we start to investigate it, we find that that's not true. If we have a theory, then perhaps we can start to look at various theories to explain it. So unless you've got a good theory, your empirically driven studies are probably wrong. Then the other issue in tourism is zombie theories. These are theories which are dead in the original discipline, but still in operation in applied fields. And a lot of our theories are zombie theories. This is a term used by Daniel Kahneman from economics. But so many of our ideas, like motivation, everyone believes in motivation, don't you? We all are motivated. But in fact, that idea, if you go back to where the concept of motivation came from in the 1930s, it was the idea that there are these drives in our head which motivate us, or which move us. And therefore, when we're talking about motivation today, we're talking about drive theory. Oh, that's its basis. And of course, drive theory has been disproven. So motivation, so one of the issues, for example, in motivation is it means it's that our motivation, our drives remain constant throughout our lives, or that we remain constant between different activities. And that's incorrect. That's why someone can be an environmentalist and motivated to recycle in one area of their lives and not environmentalists in another area of their lives. Zombie theory means that we don't understand the environmental behavior of tourists. So where do your ideas, this is what I'm trying to get you to think about, where do your concepts and ideas come from? If you read only from the tourism literature, you are making a mistake, because you're instinctive, or you're sort of subconsciously thinking the tourism theory is correct and applies, and none of that other stuff is relevant. None of the other stuff from the original discipline is relevant. That's patently incorrect. specific example. So this is where I don't know, we're running out of time, so I probably won't go into this, but I have got a number of examples of why you should use cognitive psychology when you're studying tourism, social, and individual activity. Just briefly, there are two main arguments. One is because all our thinking happens in our brain. Does everyone agree with that? Gia, do you agree that thinking happens in our brain?
Yep.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad we agree. And so unless you can therefore understand how our brain works, you can't explain what we're doing. But in fact, we know that many of the ideas about how our behavior and our thinking happens come from folk psychology, from our everyday understanding of the world around us. And the problem is cognitive science has proven that much of that folk psychological explanation is wrong. Therefore, any social scientist who is trying to explain how our brain works needs to understand how the cognitive sciences work. The other one is most social scientists don't make use of knowledge produced in the cognitive sciences when they explain social phenomena, but cognitive processes support and explain, or at least are the original thing which our social sciences then try and explain. So unless you can understand things from the bottom up, you're not using the right ideas. So this is so there's this, one of the big problems is that there's this translation problem. We might have a common sense idea like emotion, and social sciences have studied emotion, but they're not using cognitive science. So therefore we get ideas like emotion is irrational. It's not. It's one of the most rational things that can happen to you. So, but past thinking has said it's irrational. Therefore, in everyday life, we think it's irrational. And we use those ideas in our studies without going back to the original discipline. So there's many of these translation problems. Okay, so give me some practical examples. Well, here I talk about many different ideas, culture and norms. There's some very interesting thinking about what culture is and how it works based on our biologically based framework for modeling social pressure, which is what culture and norms are. Connections with nature. Why do we have a connection with nature? Well, some people say it's because of emotion. We can talk about that. Connection to nature, many different ways that you can think about connection to nature. Again, I won't go into it. Nature and well-being. Why do we feel better in nature? Well, there's some theories about that. Why do we try and bring nature into our cities? Well, some interesting theories about that. When we go, people in the museum sector have got onto this idea of attention restoration, and they say that when we go to a museum, we are recharging our brain's batteries. Incorrect. Instead, you can think about it as just the basic foraging patterns. In primitive societies, our brains had to make the decision of how long to spend looking for food in one place or moving on to another place. Therefore, we developed a way of doing that, and that process, the subconscious foraging-based decisions to seek more useful activities, is why we only spend half an hour in a museum, because we will go in there, we will experience something, and then our brain is saying, okay, you've had enough of this activity, go on and do something else. It's not about recharging our batteries, our mental batteries. So bottom line, what are my conclusions? 2 conclusions. 1, what we can do as researchers is we do know that current theories and concepts in use in many applied disciplines are old. There are good arguments for using old ideas. I mean, you see that in many papers. Theory of planned behavior. It takes work, and we are all time stressed. Besides, I'm working on practical solutions for real problems, not theory. And neuroscience and all that stuff is hype. And it will lead to a big brother state. Therefore, let's just continue to use zombie theories and common sense theories in our research. That's the decisions most tourism people come to conclusion A. Right? The other conclusion is current psychological theories and concepts in use in many applied disciplines are old. There are good arguments for using them. There are good arguments for not using them. Try and translate and disambiguate concepts. Try and do something new. Try and use new ideas. Focus on mainstream cognitive theories or other theories from the original discipline and see how they could apply. And then become famous and give me 10% of all the money that you get. That's not going to happen. So, in summary, be aware of the theories you use and their origins. Avoid zombies just grabbing ideas, and don't be a witch doctor. Use the best theory which helps with better practice. And in my opinion, social phenomena may be informed by cognitive psychology. Lots of readings, and thank you. So, open to questions. And this presentation, I'm sure, well, you'll see the recording, but I'm happy to share this presentation as well if you like. Okay, so I'll stop sharing my screen and over back to you, Gia.
Oh, hi everybody. Could you please just unmute yourself and feel free to answer, raise your questions. And Professor Nova, you got 2 questions already.
Oh, good.
Chat box. The first one is from Ferzomdi. Do you think someday there will be such a thing as theory-free social science, with all the talk about the big data era and the fourth paradigm of science?
I suppose my answer is I'm not sure if there will be, but I think it's an aspirational idea. Alternatively, you might think that social science, in terms of understanding current trends and how our brain thinks, can't be an idea. So it depends upon what you mean by social science and what you're trying to predict. Okay, so if you're trying to predict societies and how they change, well, basically you can't do that, because that's about prediction and predicting the future. And what do they say? Predicting the future, prediction, especially about the future, is difficult. So some people will say you can't do it, but other people will say, well, no, that may be true, but you can do better. And I'm one of the people who think you can try and do better. So I don't know if I answered that question, Gia, but that is my answer.
Thanks. And another question is, please, which of these would you suggest? Doing qualitative study using grounded theory approach, or using an existing theory as a basis?
Well, bottom line is, so I don't believe there is research without theory. All we're doing is not recognizing the theories that we have, or perhaps using commonly accepted ideas like what is an emotion. So if you're explaining some social phenomena using grounded theory, you must be basing your description on prior knowledge and prior theory. Therefore, there is no research. If you say you're an empiricist, you're just measuring things. All you're saying is you don't know what theories you're using. Mm-hmm. Now, who else has got a question?
I
Oh,
think you
Professor.
just, sorry.
Hi,
Yeah, can I go
Professor.
straight away?
Oh,
Right. Thanks. Thanks, Professor Scott. It's a great presentation, and I'm with you that I believe that cognitive science can be quite a provide some solid a better explanation to lots of behavior stuff. But I'm trying to also in my research try to use some cognitive theories like the dual process theory, which I believe is the mainstream explanation for human cognition. Because well, there are other arguments of multimodal or one single system, but I think the dual system is the mainstream theory. But I also find some difficulties in really applying cognitive theory into research studying tourism, especially tourist behavior, because a lot of those conclusions in cognitive science are produced in a quite controlled, well controlled with a tiny task. They gave this solid conclusion, but in our field it's more like a natural field that there's more factors we need to think about. So what would you suggest if we really apply this theory? What's the difficulties when we try to use cognitive science? Thank you.
Yeah. So wonderful question. Thank you. And just a comment, dual process theory, it's certainly useful. One of the problems I have with dual process theory is it says that we use that there are these two processes, and they're sort of like alternatives depending upon the situation. I actually think that there's two different processes. One's heuristics and one's more complex processing. But our assessment of the situation and our prior knowledge determines which one we use. And sort of that's dual process theory, I suppose. But it's mostly one or the other. Anyway, interesting theory, and certainly I'm not sure if it's the most recent theory. But here's the problem. The first problem is we're studying tourism research. How do we get to the frontier of knowledge in cognitive psychology and know that the theories that we're using are up to date, right? And the best ideas? That's a fundamental problem in working in an applied area. And so that the way around that might be to work with someone from that field, if you can find someone who wants to work in tourism. The second thing you said is you've got difficulties in applying the theories, especially those which are coming from a laboratory. Yeah, but so two things. One is, yes, most of the problems that tourism is trying to study come from studying, are instinctively trying to study how a group of people work. So most of our studies, they look at a population and they say, okay, on average, here's how things go. Cognitive science is different. It says, how does one person study something, right? And can we then find groups of people who are doing similar things, which to me is a better way of going. So one of the problems is transferring the thinking the basic assumptions of cognitive psychology into tourism, which doesn't share those basic assumptions. The second issue is about the laboratory versus real life. Yeah, real big problem. But I suppose that's just an area of research, isn't it? How much do these things apply? If we know that they work in the laboratory, the reason they wouldn't work in real life is that real life is more complicated and is not like a laboratory. But what does that mean then? What can we learn about real life that doesn't apply in the laboratory? Okay, so it's just a different question that you're trying to answer. And but there's, I mean, here's an example. I was looking at promotion, trying to understand how tourism promotion works, looked at it in the laboratory, and there are clearly some issues about how our brain is processing all this sort of stuff, which haven't been addressed in the real world. Now, it doesn't explain how things are working in the real world, but it might ask us to question those ideas. So no one piece of research will ever provide the answer to everything. It's part of a program, and we don't have particularly good programs of this. And I would encourage you to work with other people around the world. There's a few people who are interested in this area, and see what you can do. Isn't that the fun, right? If we're doing stuff which is already proven, what the hell are we doing as academics? Huh? Yep.
That's another question.
Hi, Professor
from Mark.
Scott.
Oh.
Hi, Professor Scott.
Hello.
Thank you for a very great presentation.
Thank you.
My question is regarding the use of possible use of bibliometric analysis.
Danger, Will Robinson, danger. Look, yes, go on.
What is your take on the use of bibliometric analysis in choosing a theory that we can use for our research?
Okay, so I'm the reviews editor of Current Issues in Tourism, and I see lots of people think that they are doing a literature review, which is the basis of your research, by doing a bibliographic analysis. A bibliographic analysis might describe, and often by a bibliographic analysis, they mean how many people from different countries studied this, or how many, here are different themes in the research, but they don't actually produce any new contributions to knowledge which can be studied in their research. So bibliographic research is the study of the bibliography of stuff. It's not about, it's describing things. It's not developing theoretical propositions.
Yeah.
Right? So you develop theoretical propositions by analysis and synthesis, and that's hard. You need to think about the competing positions, the definitions, the concepts and ideas, and then try and say, okay, well, here's the new thing that I'm going to test as a result of that stuff, not just identify a topic. Okay.
Yeah, okay, copy.
So don't do bibliographic research, but then do a good literature review, which is different.
Yes, copy. Thank you
Sorry.
very much, Professor Scott.
It's a problem I have. Sorry, Effie, I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, there's just one very quick question, if you can answer that.
Please.
By
Can I,
Cherries. Yeah.
can I have the questions?
Or just dealing with this last one, if combine the grounded theory with the cognitive psychology theory, which to avoid only develop the certain small theory on specific phenomenon? I think it just relates back to the grounded theory, which you kind of have answered, that you need some sort of basis, didn't you?
So cognitive psychology makes predictions and says in this particular area, this is how people will act. It's very complicated. If you want to use it to study a particular complex phenomena, which is you're going to study using grounded theory, it's difficult. You might be able to do that using experimentation or some sort of design of your research. So it's the paradigm. The paradigm is we're trying to advance knowledge and to see how well this theory applies in this area. So therefore, we need to design our study to test clearly how cognitive psychology explains that. And therefore, you need to design your experiment to test particular concepts or some aspect of the theory in this idea. And so they're different things. It's not grounded because the theory is cognitive psychology. Instead, you might be saying that you're describing a particular and reproducible type of phenomena, whereas grounded theory says, no, we're not looking at a reproducible and common type of problem. We're looking at this problem, and this problem is very different from every other problem. Therefore, the paradigms are different. Okay, so difficult to use grounded theory and cognitive psychology without some explanation of those paradigms.
And Afa, quick question.
Yes, I already posted on the chat. All right, Miss, I have a question. How different is marketing in tourism and hospitality, or can we just use the same theory discussed in the services marketing?
Oh, well, really good question. You know, why would they be different?
Simply because we have different author, different textbook.
Oh, well, no, that's not. Yeah. So no, but some people may say, so marketing says we can describe every type of promotional type of activity, say, and we do that using consumer behavior. Tourist people say we have a particular type of consumer behavior that we're studying, which is for some people more hedonic, or for some people requires more thinking, and therefore people try and develop some particular theories of this complex decision-making process rather than some theory that comes from tourism, some theory from marketing. But that is crazy. In marketing, people study long-term cognitive decision-making, and they study point of sale heuristic decision-making. So which one are we talking about in tourism? Well, and the issue, the other issue is we try and develop one theory in tourism without recognizing that all the theories from marketing apply. So some people make a decision to travel, not many, but some, on the spot. They're using, or they make a heuristic decision, right? So I don't think that, I think a lot of the confusion in tourism research, promotional research, is trying to think, well, there's one way that tourism thinks and it's different from marketing. That's not right. The tourism people think in multiple ways, depending upon the type of person they are. And all of those ideas from marketing are useful for particular segments. So we as tourism people, we get ourselves confused by trying to develop our own theories rather than to see how each one of these theories from marketing, or in fact from cognitive psychology or some other area, could apply, right?
All right.
So no, I don't think there's, you know, tourism marketing is simply the application of knowledge from psychology, interpreted and perhaps developed a little bit by the marketing people. Right?
Thanks, Noel. I totally agree. As I've done my thesis in marketing, and we've gone slightly over time. I'll just now hand over to Gia.
Thanks, Sevi.
Thank you, Evie. Thank you, Novel, Professor Novel, and that was an insightful presentation for everybody. Because next session will in 10 minutes, so probably just go outside and click another link for the well-being workshop.
Oh, well-being.
Yeah, well-being workshop.
That's
amazing.
all about cognitive psychology.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Professor Nova, could you please share your slides to everybody?
I'll do that now in the chat before I go.
Cool.
So that way everyone's got it.
Yeah.
Let me just see. Let me see.
We can also email to everyone later if you send the slides to Gia. So
yeah.
That's okay.
Oh, no. Wait a minute. No, I'm going to do it.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to, how do I do this? How do I add something to a chat?
I don't know.
No, which makes.
That's why I suggested the email, but that's okay.
Which makes.
You could probably stop recording now.